Welcome to Mira Stories. Welcome to stories that will keep you on edge.
They say some towns never die, they just stop moving. Hollow Creek was one of them, a quiet place, where every clock froze at 11:58 p.m., and the people learned to live inside a single minute. But when one woman returned home, she discovered something far worse than ghosts. She found a secret buried in time itself. Tonight, I'll tell you what really happened in that creepy small town. Make sure you're alone. Because once the story begins, time might stop for you too. The highway ended long before Evelyn Moore expected it to. Her phone screen was black, no signal, no GPS, no digital voice to tell her she'd gone too far. The air outside grew heavier with every passing mile, the mist thickening like breath on glass. Her headlights carved tunnels through the fog, illuminating crooked mailboxes, skeletal trees, and the occasional rusted car that seemed abandoned mid-escape. Somewhere behind her, the world had stopped feeling real. And ahead, it felt like time was waiting. A worn-out road sign appeared on the side of the road, its letters barely visible beneath decades of rust. Welcome to Hollow Creek, population 214. The paint was flaking, but something about the number looked fresh, as if someone had painted over it recently. Evelyn's grip tightened on the steering wheel. She hadn't been here in 20 years. Not since her little brother, Caleb, vanished near the creek. They never found him, just his bicycle, half buried in mud. The police called it a runaway case, but Evelyn knew better. Everyone in Hollow Creek did. The town had a way of taking people. Her heart pounded as she recalled the letter, yellowed paper, written in her brother's unmistakable handwriting. Evelyn, come home. They found me. But they won't let me leave again. She thought it was a cruel prank until she saw the postmark, Hollow Creek, Kentucky. Dated last month. When she rolled into town, it looked eerily unchanged. The same gas station, the same church steeple, even the same faded banners from a festival that should have ended decades ago. The people she passed moved slowly, too slowly, their eyes following her like mirrors reflecting nothing back. At the diner, the bell over the door chimed once, a weak, trembling sound. The woman behind the counter froze mid-pour. Her name tag read, Marla. Evelyn remembered her instantly. She'd worked here when Evelyn was a child, back when her mother brought them in for pancakes every Sunday. But Marla hadn't aged a day. Not a wrinkle, not a gray hair. Welcome back, Evie, she said softly, setting down the coffee pot. We were starting to think you forgot about us. Evelyn forced a laugh. Guess I just needed a reason to visit. Marla's smile didn't reach her eyes. Oh, honey. Nobody visits Hollow Creek. You only come home. When Evelyn left the diner, she caught a glimpse of the clock on the wall, 11:57 p.m., the same time it had read when she first came here as a teenager. She checked her watch. 11:57 p.m. The second hand didn't move. That night, the fog grew so thick she could barely see her porch light from inside. The town was silent, except for a faint echo, laughter, coming from the woods near the creek. Children laughing. Her heart froze. Caleb's voice had sounded like that once. She followed the sound, her flashlight cutting weakly through the mist. The trees bent inward, their branches twisted like claws. The laughter grew clearer until she reached the water's edge, the creek shimmered under the pale moonlight. And there they were, children, waist-deep in the water, glowing faintly blue. Their eyes reflected the moon like mirrors, their skin translucent as mist. One of them turned. Caleb. He smiled, exactly as she remembered. You took too long, he whispered. Before Evelyn could move, she heard footsteps behind her, dozens of them. She turned slowly. The townspeople stood in a semicircle, silent and still, their faces expressionless. Marla was among them, her eyes glistening like glass. You shouldn't have left, she said gently. No one ever really leaves Hollow Creek. The laughter stopped. The fog swallowed her scream. And when the sun rose the next morning, the sign on the edge of town had been freshly painted. Population, 215. Evelyn woke to the sound of wind chimes. They weren't hers. The melody was faint, delicate, almost beautiful, but it carried something wrong beneath the tune, a slow, uneven rhythm that didn't quite belong. She sat up on the old couch, heart pounding, realizing she was no longer in her car. Her surroundings blurred into familiarity, the living room of her childhood home. The wallpaper peeled at the corners, the same rose pattern her mother had once loved. The pictures on the mantel, her family, looked just as they had 20 years ago. Even the smell was the same, lavender soap and damp wood. But the strangest thing wasn't that she was back in her old house. It was that everything was clean. Dustless. Preserved. She stood, unsteady, calling out. Hello? Silence. Her voice seemed to bounce off invisible walls before vanishing. She stepped into the hallway. The lights flickered as she passed, one by one, as though acknowledging her presence. The family photographs followed her with their eyes, or maybe that was her imagination trying to make sense of too much wrongness. Then she saw it, Caleb's bedroom door. It was closed. The doorknob shined like new metal. She reached for it, her hand trembling. The knob was warm, as if someone had just touched it. Inside, the room was untouched. The bed was made, the toys were arranged in the same careful order Caleb had always kept. On the desk, a candle flickered faintly, its flame steady, casting shadows that didn't move like they should. Evelyn's eyes fell to the floor. A small pair of muddy footprints led from the window to the bed. Caleb, she whispered. The candle flickered violently, and she heard the floorboards creak behind her. She turned, but no one was there. The mirror on the wall trembled, a faint vibration rippling across the glass. She stepped closer, her reflection wavering. Her face stared back, but behind her reflection stood someone else. A boy. Don't stay here, Evie. His voice was low, frightened. It was Caleb. Her breath hitched. Caleb, I'm here now. I'm going to get you out. He shook his head slowly, his reflection blurred by static ripples. They won't let you. Who? The lights cut out. The candle snuffed itself. The room was swallowed in black. Then a whisper, hundreds of whispers, layered and overlapping. She came back. She belongs to us now. The town remembers its own. Evelyn stumbled backward, trying to find the door, but the wall seemed to stretch endlessly. Her hand hit something cold, wood, but when she opened the door, she was no longer in the bedroom. She was standing in the church. Rows of pews stretched endlessly under broken stained glass windows. The air reeked of mildew and candle wax. At the altar stood Marla, dressed in black, holding a book. The congregation, the same blank-faced townspeople, sat silently in the pews, their eyes fixed on Evelyn. Marla smiled warmly. Welcome home, child. We were waiting for the sermon to start. What is this? Evelyn gasped. Marla's smile widened. A renewal. You see, Hollow Creek doesn't die. We trade. One soul every generation. It keeps the fog fed and the time still. Evelyn shook her head. You're all insane. Marla chuckled softly. We're eternal. The candles around the church flared bright, blinding white, and Evelyn screamed. When she opened her eyes, she was back in the house again. The clock on the wall read 11:57 p.m. Again. The same second hand frozen. The same still air. The same faint sound of laughter echoing from outside. This time, she didn't move. She simply whispered, what do you want from me? From somewhere inside the walls, a voice answered, her mother's voice, long dead. We only want what you owe us. The night didn't end. No sunrise touched Hollow Creek. The fog outside her window stayed frozen in its milky shroud, and the clock on the wall still whispered 11:57 with every heartbeat. Evelyn sat on the edge of the couch, her hands trembling, the taste of ash in her mouth. She'd tried to leave twice already. The first time, the road looped back. The second time, it simply vanished. When she looked in the rearview mirror, the town had followed her, like it was painted on the inside of her eyes. Now she sat in silence, listening. The wind chimes had stopped. But the walls had started to breathe. A faint, rhythmic sound pulsed through the house, wood expanding, contracting, sighing like a living thing. At first, she thought it was pipes, or maybe her imagination. But then, beneath the groans, she heard whispers, soft, layered voices speaking from behind the plaster. Evelyn. Her name slithered out between the cracks. She stood, pressing her ear to the wall. The wallpaper was cold and damp, the pattern rippling under her touch. Who's there? She asked. No answer. Only the creak of the floorboards above her, slow, deliberate steps. She followed the sound up the stairs, her flashlight beam trembling against the banister. When she reached the top, she saw the attic door slightly open, a thin line of light spilling through the gap. Her mother's voice drifted out. Sweetheart, you shouldn't be up so late. Evelyn froze. Her mother had been dead for years. Mom? Come inside, Evie. The voice was warm, soft, heartbreakingly familiar. She pushed the door open. The attic glowed with candlelight, though no candles burned. Old trunks lined the walls, their lids slightly ajar. Dust floated in the air like falling snow. And in the center, sitting in her mother's rocking chair, was a shape made of shadows. Not absence, presence. A figure woven from darkness itself, its features half-formed, like a memory trying to remember how to exist. Mom? Evelyn whispered again, tears welling. The figure tilted its head. Do you remember what you promised? Evelyn shook her head. I don't. The whispering rose. The walls trembled with hundreds of overlapping voices, men, women, children, all murmuring the same phrase. You said you'd come back. You said you'd keep us alive. You said you'd never leave. The floor beneath her shuddered. The attic spun. And suddenly she wasn't standing anymore, she was falling. She hit the ground hard, not on wood, but on grass. When she looked around, she was standing in the middle of Hollow Creek's town square. The fog was gone. Everything shimmered in golden sunlight. People smiled. Laughed. Lived. It was Hollow Creek, but decades ago. Children ran past her, chasing a ball. A young woman waved from a store window. Evelyn turned in circles, breathless. What is this? A man walked up to her, tall, kind-eyed, dressed in an old sheriff's uniform. His badge read Sheriff Moore. Her father. Evelyn, he said gently, it's good to see you again. Tears blurred her vision. Dad. He smiled sadly. It's all right. You're just seeing the way it was, before the town made its choice. What choice? He sighed. When the mines closed, people were starving. The fog came first, then the hunger. Hollow Creek was dying. But something old offered us a bargain. A stillness. One soul, once every generation, and time would never touch us again. Evelyn stared in horror. You sacrificed people? Her father nodded. We called it mercy. We called it survival. But it's a curse, Evelyn. The longer it feeds, the more it remembers the ones who tried to leave. And it wants you back, because you're the only one who ever escaped." Before she could answer, the sky cracked, the sunlight dimmed like dying embers. The world melted back into fog and shadow. Her father's face dissolved, and the whispering returned. "Come home, Evelyn. Finish what your blood began." She woke on the floor of the attic, gasping, her flashlight flickering weakly. On the wall beside her, written in what looked like soot, were 5 words. "The town remembers its debt." The fog pressed against the windows like a living skin. Evelyn watched it pulse, slow, deliberate, as though something vast exhaled on the other side of the glass. Each breath clouded the pane, leaving faint handprints that vanished before she could blink. She hadn't slept. Every time she closed her eyes, the whispers returned. Every time she tried to leave, the road folded in on itself like a snake devouring its tail. It was almost peaceful now, that numb space between fear and surrender. Almost. A knock startled her. 3 soft taps on the door. When she opened it, a figure stood in the fog, a young boy, soaked to the bone, his eyes the pale color of moonlight. "Caleb," she gasped. He smiled faintly. "You shouldn't open the door, Evie. The fog gets in." She froze. You're alive?" He looked down at his hands, faintly translucent, the edges of his fingers fading in and out like smoke. "Not really." He stepped forward, and the air around him shifted. The fog swirled tighter, pressing at the threshold like it wanted to crawl inside. Caleb looked over his shoulder nervously. "They don't like it when you remember." "Who doesn't?" He didn't answer. Instead, he reached into his pocket and pulled out something small, a pocket watch. Its glass was cracked, the hands frozen at 11:57. "This is your time now," he whispered, placing it in her palm. "When the fog breathes in, you'll forget everything. When it breathes out, it remembers you." The door behind her slammed shut on its own. The lights flickered. When she looked up, Caleb was gone, swallowed by the fog. Only the pocket watch remained, ticking faintly. For the first time, the second hand moved, once. Then stopped again. A low rumble shuddered through the house. Evelyn stumbled back, clutching the watch. From the cracks around the window, fog began to seep in. It slithered across the floor, rising slowly, curling up her legs like smoke. Her breath hitched. The air tasted sweet, metallic, like blood and rainwater. The whispers grew louder. "Breathe in. Breathe out. Remember what was promised." She backed away, but the fog followed, reaching toward her ankles, her hands, her throat. The walls began to pulse again, wood groaning like ribs under pressure. Then, a sudden stillness. And a sound, a long, shuddering inhale that seemed to come from everywhere. The fog moved, not like mist, but like a creature. Tendrils curled around furniture, tracing along photographs, brushing gently against Evelyn's cheek. She screamed, swinging wildly, but the air was thick and alive. "Get out of my house," she shouted. The fog didn't leave. It laughed. A deep, layered laugh, dozens of voices merging into one. Then a shape began to form inside it, human, but wrong. Its features flickered in and out, mouths where eyes should be, eyes that blinked from its chest, a body stitched from shadow and breath. It spoke with every voice at once. "Do you know what you are, Evelyn?" She couldn't answer. "You are the breath between the dead and the living. You escaped your offering, but time still remembers your debt. Each second you've lived since then," it leaned closer, "was stolen from Hollow Creek." Her pulse thundered. "You're lying." The creature's smile was wide and endless. "Then why hasn't your heart beaten since you came home?" She froze. The pocket watch ticked once, and fell silent again. No heartbeat. No breath. Just the sound of the fog breathing for her. When the clock struck 11:57, the fog exhaled, and Evelyn found herself standing in the middle of Main Street again. No one around. The air perfectly still. But in every window reflection, she saw herself, hundreds of versions of her, all frozen, all waiting for the next breath. The air tasted of rust and river water. Evelyn walked down Main Street, the pocket watch clutched so tight in her fist that its edges bit into her skin. The fog had drawn back just enough for her to see the outlines of buildings, diner, post office, the same grocery that had closed before she was born, but every window reflected her. Not quite the same her. Some younger, some older, one with blood on her cheek, one smiling a smile she'd never made. She stopped in front of the barber's shop. In the mirror inside, her reflection blinked independently. "Evie," it whispered, fog leaking from its mouth. Then it pressed its hands against the inside of the glass. The pain rippled like water. She stumbled back, heart pounding even though she could not feel a beat. Behind her, the bells above the diner door jingled once, slow and deliberate. Marla stepped out, apron spotless, eyes hollow. "You shouldn't look too long," she said. "They get jealous." "Jealous of what?" Marla's head tilted. "Of the one still moving." Evelyn turned, scanning the empty street. "What are they? Ghosts?" Marla smiled. "Reminders." The waitress reached into her apron pocket and pulled out a faded photograph, an old town portrait. Everyone was there, men, women, children, and her. Standing among them, smiling. The caption read Hollow Creek, Pop 214. Evelyn traced the photo with her thumb. Her face was identical, same clothes she wore now. "This can't be real." Marla's tone softened. "Every generation, the town adds a face to the fog. Yours has been waiting for 20 years. Lightning flickered inside the clouds above. For an instant, the entire town was cast in silver. Every window shone with 100 faces, people screaming silently, pressed behind the glass, hands outstretched. The fog rolled closer. From inside it came voices, her father's, her brother's, and dozens she didn't recognize, all murmuring her name. "Evelyn. Let go. Join us." She ran. Down the street, past the church, past the gas station, until she reached the edge of town where the road simply ended in fog. Her reflection followed her in every storefront, every car mirror, every puddle. Each one called out, mouths moving out of sync, "Don't fight it." The fog caught her like hands. It lifted her gently, almost tenderly, and within the gray she saw shapes, faces forming and dissolving. The woman from the diner, the sheriff, children laughing, Caleb waving, all suspended like insects in amber. Their eyes glowed faintly blue. Caleb's voice whispered close to her ear. "You can't kill what never breathes. You can only remember it." She reached for him, but he was already fading, swallowed by the mist. When her feet touched ground again, she stood before the town sign. The paint was still wet. Population 216. And for a heartbeat that wasn't hers, she saw another name appear beneath it, Evelyn Moore. The hands of the pocket watch twitched once, then fell still again. Evelyn stared at it, waiting for the tick that never came. Around her, Hollow Creek lay motionless, fog drifting in slow ribbons, neon sign from the diner frozen mid-flicker, rain hanging in the air like suspended glass. She felt as though the world had inhaled and forgotten how to exhale. The watch pulsed faintly against her palm, warm, alive. "Why me?" she whispered. A voice answered from behind her. "Because you're the one who stopped the clock." She turned. At the end of the street stood the sheriff, her father, his outline flickering between flesh and shadow. In one moment he was young, in another old, in another a silhouette with hollow eyes. "This place exists inside 1 minute," he said. The moment before the town died. The moment before the fog took its first breath. Every soul here is trapped in that minute, reliving it again and again. Evelyn shook her head. Then why am I moving? Because you left, he said simply. You broke the circle. The town's stillness cracked, and time began to leak. It's trying to pull you back to mend the tear. The ground trembled. Windows shattered without sound. The church bell tolled once, echoing forever. Her father reached for her hand, and when his fingers touched hers, flashes poured into her mind, miners coughing in the dark, the first fog seeping through the tunnels. The townsfolk gathered at midnight as the preacher offered a prayer to something that answered. A promise of life without decay. A single moment stretched into eternity. But the bargain required a heartbeat to feed on. And Evelyn had been born seconds before the ritual finished. You were the town's last breath, he whispered. Its living debt. Evelyn stepped back. Then end it. Let me finish what I started. You can't, he said. If you die here, the clock resets. Everyone forgets. The fog begins again. She looked down at the pocket watch, its glass now glowing from within, faint images moving beneath the surface, faces, buildings, streets repeating endlessly. What happens if I break it? Her father's face fractured like cracked porcelain. Then the minute ends. And so does everything inside it. Thunder rolled through the fog, low and endless. The diner lights burst, sending sparks that froze mid-air. The watch began to hum, a deep vibration that matched the beat she could no longer feel in her chest. Evelyn lifted it high. Then it ends with me. The glass splintered under her thumb. A light, white, blinding, infinite, erupted outward, and for the first time, the second hand moved. 11:58 p.m. The sound of rushing wind filled the town as the fog screamed, peeling away from buildings, tearing loose from the earth like smoke pulled into a vacuum. Faces inside it twisted in agony, then relief. Her father's voice, faint, fading, you gave us time again. The light swallowed her. When it dimmed, Hollow Creek was gone. Only the whisper of rain remained. And the broken watch lay in the mud, its hands finally spinning freely. The rain fell harder now, washing the gray dust from Evelyn's face. She stood on cracked asphalt that hadn't existed a minute ago. The sign that once read, "Welcome to Hollow Creek," lay broken at her feet. Behind her, nothing. No town. No fog. Just a field of damp weeds swaying beneath power lines that buzzed like angry insects. For the first time in years, she heard the steady rhythm of her own heartbeat. It scared her. Headlights cut through the darkness. A truck slowed beside her, a man in a reflective vest leaned out. You okay, miss? You from around here? Evelyn nodded weakly. Her voice felt foreign. Where is this? He frowned. Route 17, just outside Marlow. Hollow Creek? That place got wiped out in a flood back in '83. Evelyn's stomach tightened. 1983. She opened her palm, the shattered pocket watch still there, its hands spinning smoothly, counting real seconds. The man offered her a ride. She climbed in. As the truck rolled through the rain, she glanced at the window. Her reflection blinked, out of sync. They reached Marlow just before dawn. Neon signs hummed. Coffee steam curled from a 24-hour diner. Normal. But when Evelyn stepped inside, she froze. Behind the counter stood Marla. Same apron. Same calm smile. Only this time her eyes weren't hollow, they were human. Coffee? Marla asked. Evelyn managed a nod. As she sipped, a boy in the corner stirred his drink with a spoon that clinked rhythmically, tick tick tick, just like the watch. He looked up. His eyes glimmered faint blue. Then another customer entered, the sheriff. Younger, alive, uniform crisp. He tipped his hat to Marla, sat at the far booth, and for a second, his outline shimmered like heat haze. Evelyn's breath caught. The fog hadn't vanished, it had spread. It had learned how to wear new faces. She gripped the broken watch. "Not again," she whispered. The second hand stopped dead. The diner lights flickered. Everyone froze for half a heartbeat, then resumed as if nothing had happened. Marla's voice floated over. "You can't escape time, honey. You just start a new one." Outside, thunder rumbled. Somewhere far off, a church bell rang once. 11:59 p.m. The sun never fully rose over Marlow. It hovered behind a thin sheet of cloud, bathing the town in a colorless glow that felt like the inside of a memory. Evelyn wandered the streets, clutching the broken watch in her pocket, listening for the sound of that single bell. Every step seemed to echo a fraction too late, half a beat behind the real world. Posters on the walls showed faces she almost recognized. One read "Missing since 1983. Another, "Reopening of Hollow Creek Memorial this Friday." Her name wasn't there, yet people on the sidewalk glanced at her as if trying to remember where they'd seen her before. At noon, she reached the library. Inside, dust floated like ash. Newspapers lined the microfilm reader, headlines told the same story over and over: miners trapped in fog mishap. Town vanishes, time stopped at 11:58 p.m. In every photo, she saw the same crowd: Marla, the sheriff, Caleb, frozen in a single frame. Behind them, in the corner of the picture, a child was running out of view. The caption read, "Last seen fleeing Hollow Creek before the collapse." Her. She pressed her hand against the page. Time didn't trap them, their fear did. The fog was only a shape that fear wore when people stopped believing the next second would come. The pocket watch ticked once. Then again. Evelyn looked around. The world outside the window was moving faster now, people hurrying, clouds shifting. Every sound grew sharper. And she realized the town wasn't haunted anymore. It was healing. She stepped outside, placed the watch on the steps, and whispered, "Let it keep going." The second hand moved past 11:59. For the first time in 42 years, the clock struck midnight. The fog didn't return. It simply sighed, like an old ghost finally exhaling. Evelyn didn't remember falling asleep on the library steps, but when she opened her eyes, the air was clear. The world had color again, soft greens, faded golds, the scent of wet soil after rain. The sign across the street no longer said Hollow Creek Memorial. It said Hollow Creek, population 2,146. Children ran through the square where fog once coiled. The church bell rang noon, not midnight. Life had begun again, as if someone had pressed play after decades of pause. She walked through the streets that were both familiar and brand new. The diner stood rebuilt, its windows clean, its neon sign buzzing softly. Inside, laughter spilled from the booths. No Marla this time, just a young waitress humming to herself. Evelyn sat near the window, tracing her finger along the table. The reflection staring back at her was calm, alive. For once, it blinked exactly when she did. The waitress smiled. "You passing through?" Evelyn nodded. "Something like that. Where you headed?" She thought for a long moment, watching the sky shift from gray to blue. "Forward," she said. "Just forward." As she left the diner, she paused by the rebuilt clock tower in the town center. The clock hands gleamed in the sun, ticking steady, unbroken. She placed the shattered pocket watch at its base. The moment it touched stone, it dissolved into silver dust that scattered with the wind. Somewhere far behind her, a whisper rose, hundreds of voices sighing in relief, like an entire town finally letting go. The breeze carried the scent of rain and old wood, and as it brushed her cheek, she smiled. For the first time since that endless night, Evelyn didn't look back. No curse is stronger than the courage to keep moving. Sometimes, the scariest ghosts are the moments we refuse to leave behind. But every breath, every heartbeat, is a new chance to rebuild, to forgive, and to go home to the next second. And so, Hollow Creek finally moved forward. The clocks began to tick, and the fog became just another story whispered to the night. But tell me, if time ever stopped around you, would you notice? If this story stayed with you, subscribe to Mira Stories, where every tale hides a truth, and every truth hides a shadow.